so much, everyone, for joining. We are super excited to host this conversation today. We appreciate that you are joining. Some of you early, others late. It's 10 p.m. for Darius, and it's 7 a.m. for Jerry. It's 10 a.m. for me, and there are others who knows where in other time zones. But the beauty of technology is that we are all united here to talk about this important topic, which is AI. If you heard the music, that was all AI generated, and the words were beautiful. And so that give us, a little bit of a welcome on why and how can we build applications that, can do human things, but accelerated by AI. My name is Jimena Gates, and I am the co-founder of Build Within. Build Within is a company, and also we'll think of ourselves as thought leaders in workforce for to help people to get a chance at have the career that they dream, and employers to have the talent they need to drive not only their companies but a successful economy. So today I would like to introduce Darius Liu with Singapore AI. AI Singapore, which is actually the name of the organization that Darius is the head of partnerships and growth, is an amazing organization that is creating an ecosystem in Southeast Asia. They are in Singapore, but their ecosystem includes the other countries in Southeast Asia, with a goal to not only create a more organized ecosystem, but also to provide the resources for local developers, entrepreneurs, to access capital, and also resources in general to build companies that are powered by AI. And as part of their many initiatives, they have an open source model that is the result of an effort by AI Singapore to create a data set that is inclusive and representative of Southeast Asia culture and language. And he's going to tell us a little bit about AI Singapore initiatives. And then after his short overview, he's going to have a conversation with Jerry Gomez, who is the head of AI engineering here at Build Within. Jerry is also a co-founder. He is one of those thought leaders that you will love to you just enjoy talking to at any time. He loves technology. He's passionate. He built those songs that you listen to today. So with no further ado, I would like to welcome them, Darius and Jerry, to this conversation. Please, any questions that you have, put them in the chat and they'll try to get to them. Thank you so much, and take it away, Darius.
Thanks, Jimena. Good morning, evening, afternoon, wherever in the world you may be. My name is Darius Liu. I'm head of strategy, partnerships, and growth at AI Singapore. Very warm greetings from all the way from Singapore and Southeast Asia. And I'm delighted to be invited to share my thoughts with you here today at today's webinar. Big thank you for Jimena for initiating this. I actually met her all the way in Peru, believe it or not, at South America at an APEC event. And we clicked and one thing led to another, and here we are. Today's sharing is entitled Forging a Multilingual LLM Future with Cross-Cultural Linguistics and Global Data Collection. Phew, what a tongue twister. But before I delve in, perhaps a few words to introduce AI Singapore. As I recognize many of us may not be fully acquainted with the organization that I represent. Now, AI Singapore, or AISG for short, is a national program launched by the National Research Foundation of Singapore, which is the equivalent of the NSF in the US. It's launched in 2017 to boost Singapore's AI capabilities to power our economy. Now, AI Singapore is structured across 5 pillars. Next slide. Each with its own development focus, spanning fundamental research, industry engagement, national AI talent capability development initiatives, which include a very, very successful apprentice program and AI governance research, and last but not least, large language model or LLM development. And I represent the AI products pillar, the on the second column, and that's the LLM team that built C-Line, which I will share in a little bit. Now, while AI Singapore is Singapore's national program, our vision sort of extends far beyond the shores of Singapore. AISG aims to bring together research institutions, government agencies, startups, companies, and everybody from Southeast Asia, as well as beyond the region, to perform research, create common infrastructure, co-develop tools, and create knowledge that will uplift and create productivity and prosperity for everyone involved. And it's indeed my pleasure to represent AISG here today. Now, I believe that we are kind of all in agreement that AI, particularly Gen AI and LLMs, represent a step change in technological advancement, similar to the advent of the internet or maybe the mobile revolution. And each of us here would have interacted with ChatGPT at some point. This tool is powered by LLMs, GPT 3.5, GPT 4, and so on, and more are developed even as we speak. Now, Gen AI and LLMs hold the promise to enhance productivity across a very wide range of industries and knowledge domains. And here in the next slide, we have some research by McKinsey that tries to quantify the economic impact of Gen AI. Well, suffice to say, no one could have imagined the iPhone 15 when the first mobile phone was brought to market. And in the same way, it's difficult to imagine where Gen AI will bring us in the years ahead. But needless to say, this technology will accelerate digital inclusion and facilitate sort of movement of goods and services in a way that we've never imagined before. It is imperative, therefore, that the benefits of Gen AI and LLMs are harnessed in an equitable, fair, and transparent and efficient manner across all countries and economies, and that these benefits accrue to all the peoples in an equitable way. Now, we at AISG have identified 3 trends in the next slide that in the development of LLMs that if we don't address this could lead to an imbalance of the distribution of benefits that this technology brings across economies. And these are, and I shall list them out. Number 1, imbalance of linguistic representation in commonly used LLMs that favors English on one end and low resource languages on the other. So the first one, imbalance of linguistic representation. 2, a greater need for last mile connectivity takes the form of enabling tools that ease the adoption of less technologically sophisticated business entities. So 2, last mile connectivity. And last but not least, the lack of investment in common digital infrastructure that accelerates adoption and innovation of Gen AI products and solutions. So 3, common infrastructure, right? So it's on the slide here. But let me elaborate more on some of these concerns and then share how AISG is working to address them. Now, first, it is well known that LLM developments so far have been led by a few economies, mainly Western ones, but also China. And depending on which LLM leaderboard you look at, you will find that English, Chinese, and bilingual LLMs of these 2 languages comprise over 2/3 of the most commonly used LLMs today. And this is perhaps not surprising, given that much of the data and therefore the knowledge on the internet and other open data sets are in these 2 languages. But what this also means is that if LLM development continues on this trajectory, these models will become less and less capable in other languages, right? Particularly the lower resource ones. And this will also mean that the models will not be culturally attuned to the local contexts of these economies that conduct businesses using these lower resource languages. And this will result in turn in the technology being less useful and relevant to business use cases in these economies. So as an example, a chatbot powered by a model trained on internet data performs really well in English, perhaps maybe other languages in the West, but AISG has run experiments to show that these same models really underperform in low resource languages with especially non-Latin scripts like Thai, Vietnamese, Tamil, and some of the Indian languages. They also fail to grasp the local nuances and cultural sensitivities. And if this is left unaddressed and it continues on, economies whose language of business are underrepresented in LLMs will not benefit from the Gen AI revolution as much, simply because these models do not cater to their linguistic and cultural contexts. So on the next slide, we have a graph from a group of researchers from Harvard University that attempted to quantify how closely responses from OpenAI's GPT models are to human responses in various countries. In other words, how human-like GPT is in various countries. The results suggest a strong Western bias in cultural values, political beliefs, social attitudes in the GPT models. Again, nothing wrong. It's just the way it is, right? So I've explained the issue of linguistic underrepresentation. Now let me move on to the need for enabling tools that bridge the last mile connectivity, right? I believe that almost every business that we speak today to will agree that Gen AI solutions are necessary. The next question then they will ask is how? What's the first step? This is what I call the last mile connectivity gap, right? And without easy to use tools and solutions and best practice codes and so on, only the most sophisticated entities in each economy will be able to use LLM-based solutions effectively. We need these benefits to be spread more pervasively throughout not only the big enterprises, but also the SMEs as well. And this can only be addressed if we encourage the build out and promulgation of what I call enabling tools. The end customer of enabling tools are not the end customer of businesses, but the businesses themselves, right? And by using these tools, which include not only softwares, but also best practices, documentations, guides, and so on, businesses, large and small, will be empowered to put AI-based solutions into production. This in turn spawns innovation and accelerates widespread adoption throughout the economy. Now let me move on to the next idea of investing in common infrastructure. Now here I define common infrastructure as something that if you leave the private sector to its own devices, they will not invest to build. But if this same common infrastructure is publicly funded, built, or provided for all to use, all entities in the economy will benefit. So think of roads, drainage, sanitation systems, electrical distribution networks, and so on, right? If these are built and managed well at the countrywide level, everybody benefits. Now, this is, I've shown some pictures of physical common infrastructure, but what does common infrastructure look like in the digital world, right? One can think of perhaps the internet. In the world of generative AI, what could it be? If these things were built, what could catalyze adoption and innovation? And here I propose three things: data sets, the models, as well as enabling tools. Right, this slide. Data sets, models, and enabling tools. I propose that these three are common infrastructure. These are the key elements that the models, underlying data used to train the models, and enabling tools, if provided in an open, transparent, and easily accessible manner, it will undoubtedly have a catalytic effect on future developments of solutions based on these models. Now I've spoken about three issues, right? Linguistic underrepresentation, need for enabling tools, and lack of common infrastructure. AI Singapore's effort in tackling these three issues come together in what we call the Sea Lion project, SEA/Lion. This has been ongoing since the start of 2023. So what is Sea Lion? Sea Lion is AI Singapore's effort in training a family of LLMs that is specifically catered to handle Southeast Asian languages and cultural sensitivities. And there are three main building blocks to this effort, all of which, by the way, will be open source, important point. They will all be open source for the common good, right? Build all this stuff, give it away for free. These building blocks are data sets, models themselves, as well as the enabling tools, like I said before. So let me go on to the data. One of the key issues with Southeast Asian data, or with data in any other low resource region for that matter, is that it comprises primarily of two things. Number one, machine translation. Number two, advertising. The quality of such data in open domain, primarily the internet, is painfully low. You can see on this slide an actual sample of an internet data from Southeast Asia, right? not the cleanest, not the most useful. And as such, the Sea Lion team devotes a significant amount of time and effort to cleaning existing data sets, building data pipelines to facilitate continuous mining and cleaning of internet data, as well as building an ecosystem of partners, which I spell on the next slide, who contribute their data sets to build up the common Sea Lion data corpus. So it's the cleaning of the data, building data pipelines, as well as building an ecosystem for collaboration. Now on the next slide, there is a snapshot of the pre-training data set that we used to train the 7 billion parameter model. This is a little bit outdated already because the data continues to come in, right? So we are currently almost at double this number, right? But this is the data corpus that's used to train the 7 billion model that is out of Hugging Face right now. The key statistic to note here is the percentage of Southeast Asian language or SEA languages, right? It's 13%, 1-3. Doesn't sound like a lot until you realize that Llama 2 has about 0.5% or less. So what this means is that even in the last iteration, we have about 26 to 30 times more Southeast Asian language content than Llama 2. And we're working to build this to about 40% or more, while increasing the overall number of tokens to about 2 to 3 trillion, right? This is super important. We welcome everybody to contribute to this meaningful effort and join us if this is important to you. Now, at the risk of getting a little bit more technical, let me also share that we've built our own tokenizer. And a tokenizer, of course, is the part of the model that breaks down words into smaller units called tokens that are used to train the LLM. Now, because existing tokenizers are optimized for English or other languages that use the Latin script, they perform really poorly for low resource languages that are not Latinized, right? So like Thai, Vietnamese, and so on. Our tokenizer has a much larger vocabulary size, 256K, right? 256K token vocabulary size. And this allows the model to capture the richness of the various scripts across the language families that exist in the region, leading to better model performance linguistically. Now, alongside the model, we need a way to measure how well the model is performing. Sea Lion team has attempted to do so in the form of the BASA, B-H-A-S-A framework for evaluation as shown in this slide. Now, the paper that that publishes the full sort of framework in detail is actually available to download. Simply just Google BASA evaluation, B-H-A-S-A, and you arrive at the paper. I'm happy to share that the BASA evaluation framework will soon be incorporated to Stanford Helm. So it will be widely available in that more holistic framework as well. Now, moving on to the model themselves, right? The idea of Sea Lion and Sea Lion models is not to release models that directly compete with the large model developers out there, right? Think OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, and so on. But rather, we see Sea Lion as complementary to these models. And in the steady state, intuitively, you would have the idea that Sea Lion will become the Southeast Asian expert model in the constellation of expert models that are deployed on any particular use case. So we complement and we do not compete because we have no competitive advantage in terms of money, in talent, GPUs, and so on. But we do care about languages and we care about the data, and therefore we can complement. To date, we have trained and released a 3 and 7B parameter model, base model, as well as a 7B instruct model. We have also released smaller encoder style models that are trained on the same data set. These are all available on Hugging Face, by the way. Perhaps rather uniquely as well, we have also released the first version of our pre-training data corpus, also on Hugging Face. And we will continue to refine and enhance this data set and continue to open source it as we progress. So everybody knows what goes into the sausage. Right? And all our models, training data sets, tokenizers are all open source on permissive licenses, which allows everyone and anyone to take it, make money from it in a commercial way, free of charge. Now, the following 2 slides show some benchmark performance for those of us who are interested. This is the first iteration of Sea Lion 7B. Now, you notice that Sea Lion 7B is somewhere in the middle of the leaderboard on this slide when it comes to generic English-centric tasks. But the next slide, you'll see that it inhabits the top of the leaderboard for Southeast Asian tasks. Perhaps surprisingly, it even beats GPT-4 in sentiment analysis tasks, right? This is a much larger model. And these results are encouraging for the Sea Lion team as we continue to build on these early results and release better and higher quality models and data sets for everyone's use in the months ahead. Now, as part of the build-up for the Sea Lion team, we've also formed an internal applications team that's tasked to build enabling tools, like I mentioned, that will be also open source for community use. These tools aim to shorten the lead time from conceptualization from an application powered by any LLM all the way to production. Now, I often tell people that Sea Lion is not primarily about building data models, but it is about building a community, an ecosystem. And we would not have been able to build or get this far and definitely not be able to achieve our vision if we go on it alone. So the next slide, our ecosystem of partners that we show here, non-exhaustive, of course. These have been invaluable in their contributions to data, research, evaluation, alignment, putting it into production-ready applications and giving us feedback and all of the above. We've been continuing to build this network of like-minded partners across academia, across government agencies, across commercial entities. We continue to build this network who are willing to come alongside to contribute to this, I feel, a very important endeavor. Now, through continued network on Sea Lion and associated tools, all in open source, AI Singapore aims to address the representation gap, as well as close the last mile connectivity gap, and entrench Sea Lion and datasets as a common utility for the common good. In the coming months, we will release larger, more capable 13B parameter models, and at the end of the year, a mid-sized model of about equivalent 30 billion, right? Either one single dense or a mixture of experts. Alignment and safety work is also ongoing to make the model more robust and safe to use. Now, the work to make the benefit of Gen AI and LLMs broad-based cannot stop with Sea Lion. More can be done to encourage and incentivize open sourcing of codes, data sets, enabling tools that can serve as common utilities to encourage AI adoption in an inclusive way. So I leave you on the next slide, which is my last slide, with 3 ideas and 3 building blocks, right? If you remember nothing else of what I said, remember these, right? 3 ideas: linguistic representation, last mile connectivity, common infrastructure. The building blocks for these: data, models, tools. AI Singapore started with Sea Lion, but it cannot be just a Singapore or a Southeast Asian project, right? We hope that this is the beginning of a shared vision. I hope it spurs something in your mind that if you believe that everyone in the world works together in this way, we can shape the trajectory of LLM development at this very nascent stage, contribute to inclusive adoption of Gen AI, and enable benefits to accrue to everyone for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Darius. That's amazing, and we're really at an inflection point, right, of really pushing these technologies, and it's so important to work together across countries, across the world, to push these technologies for the better of humankind. You covered a lot of really, really important topics about AI and LLM development. I thought it'd be interesting to show from the engineering side what a lot of these practices look like in actual practice. So I'm going to share my screen real quick and kind of just show what LLM development looks like and demystify a lot of these concepts that seem very technical and kind of out of reach for people, right? And so here I have an LLM that I built on my computer. It is Karpathy's Nano GPT. Karpathy is a very famous LLM AI engineer. Check out his YouTube channel if you're interested about learning more about how these things are built. But this LLM right here is outputting text in the form of Shakespeare. And this LLM is called Tiny Shakespeare. And so this is all AI generated, but it looks like Shakespeare, even though it's not literally text and words that he wrote. And so how can these things be built? And you can see here, I'm running it and new things are coming in as they are generated, right? And Darius talked a lot and touched into these kind of core pillars around data and tools that we need. And that's really the forefront of LLM and AI development. It's data. Data is key, data is king, clean data, having access to data is how we build these models and make them better for everyone. And so I'm going to walk through a little bit of code. Hopefully it's not too scary. But here we have our initial data that we're looking at. So this is actual Shakespeare text. So what an LLM engineer would do, say we're trying to train a model to generate, in this case, Shakespearean-like text, we have to aggregate base data from Shakespeare. So someone went out there and actually scraped all of Shakespeare's text, cleaned it up, consolidated it, and put it in one place for LLM engineers to use. And then from here, this is all Python. So some of the common tools that AI engineers use is Python. PyTorch is a very popular library. TensorFlow is another one, but I would say PyTorch has gained kind of the market leader of training LLMs and things like that. And so when LLMs in the core, what they're doing is they're predicting the next token or the next set of words or letters, right? Which is why when you interact with ChatGPT, you see it kind of typing at you in a way. That's intentional because every single letter and word that is coming after is just a prediction of the most likely outcome. And how do we get these good predictions is by training and being able to have the right numbers to put into formulas to get accurate outputs of predictions of next words. And so here, Darius talked a little bit about encoding and how different techniques of encoding work. We're just doing a very simple character-to-character encoding here. But in the nuances of different languages, as Darius said, will have different contexts of text, right? So Asian languages with characters don't have spaces, for example. Different languages right to left, which is very different than how we write left to right. And so being able to predict the next token in a sentence, the next letter in a sentence becomes increasingly difficult as you come across different languages there. And so here, we're just dealing with text and we're breaking it up and creating our tokens to map them into numbers. And then here is the actual neural network, a GPT model. As you can see, the file is extremely small. It just fits in one file. And that goes to show that GPT models are actually fairly simple in code, but the actual value comes from the data that you give it and you train and the data that you train it. And so I was able to train this on my local computer. In practice, this works because we're just training a model that outputs Shakespearean text. Obviously, this will not generate code. This won't work like ChatGPT. You can't talk to it. If you want to train a model like that, you actually have to give it a lot more of different data. And that's where open web text comes in. So open web text, is think of it like a Wikipedia of the entire internet. ChatGPT and all these data scientists went out and scraped out all of this data. And that's how they trained the GPT-2, GPT-3 models, and GPT-4. There's a couple more advanced techniques for as they get more complex. But I was able to actually train this on my MacBook Pro. In practice, these things take a lot of resources to train. They're trained on like NVIDIA GPUs, huge clusters that cost a lot of money. I'm here at Cerebral Valley in San Francisco at the heart of where all this is happening. I had the honor to go to the Databricks office recently, and they shared how they trained DBRX, which is their open source GPT, and they spent over $10 million in GPUs alone to train these models. It was a gargantuan effort. They had to coordinate across AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, extremely complicated engineering to get to a level of GPTs for that works. But it's cool to see how the actual foundations of a model are simple enough where you can run it on your local computer and get a model that's very specific to one use case, in this case, generating Shakespearean text. And then Hugging Face was a tool that Darius referenced a lot. Hugging Face you can think of as kind of a GitHub of data science and AI. And so this is where people, AI Singapore has a Hugging Face page here where people can share their models in open source formats. They can share data sets to train other models. You can fine tune other people's models to take them and put your data in them to make them better for your use case. And so this goes to show how important the collaboration is for training AI models. You're sharing data, being open with your models, giving feedback, right? We're building this kind of as a world, and it's a kind of a hive mind, which is super cool to think about, that we're mirroring how we think and how we work the human mind as an entire world, and uploading it and sharing it in a public space to make sure that it's safe, that it's representative, that we have data sets from all these different kinds of countries and languages. And AI Singapore shares, this is an example of their data set that may I use to fine tune their models. And so if I wanted to make a model that piggyback off of AI Singapore's work, I can go in and actually grab this data that someone spent probably a lot of time and money extracting and cleaning up and formalizing, and use it for myself, and hopefully give back as well to the community with data that I may have or things like that. So that was kind of a glimpse into the technicals of how these things work, and some of the tools and tool sets, and why it's important to have open data sets, which is really cool. So Darius, I'm curious to hear your perspective on a couple of things. I know that you talked about how important like the digitization of data is in representation, right? I think that's a huge problem in the US and in Singapore, the Europe. We're very privileged that we have access to like internet, right? And have for many years kind of developed a digital footprint of ourselves in the internet. And you talked a little bit about the quality of data, how in Singapore, it's a lot of garbage data with ads and things like that. So how are you tackling the digitization of lower represented communities on the internet? And how is Singapore supporting these kind of initiatives, which is very important in LLM development?
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. Now, before I answer that question, I think thanks for sharing some of these more technical aspects of LLM development. And it's interesting, right? Because some of these things that you just shared are actually examples of common infrastructure, right? Hugging Face is common infrastructure. If it's there, everybody benefits. The reason why LLM training code is short is because somebody put PyTorch, TensorFlow, LangChain on there. That's common infrastructure, right? You have to do it all over again. It's there and it's free to use. So we encourage, more of these things to come in. It just accelerates, right? The ability for people to just train it on their MacBooks, right? For that matter. Now, to your question, yeah. So there are a lot of there are a bunch of very low resource languages in Southeast Asia. I mean, not just in Southeast Asia, but around the world. And Singapore's contribution, of course, is well encapsulated in the Sea Lion project, and that requires things like GPUs. It requires things like AI engineers, time, and money, and all that kind of thing. So the national program is actually an effort to support not only Singapore but the region. Now, for languages that are really low resource, a couple of things are done. Not many resources can be found on the internet, right? Because they're not that many are digitized. So we literally go into the libraries and we talk to the governments and the educational institutions of the countries themselves, as well as academics that study the languages and cultures of these countries to get at things like manuscripts, books, educational materials, and this sort of thing, and actually digitize them. So we actually scan books and this sort of thing and put it into a digitized format. We also do a fair bit of research that's currently ongoing in terms of transfer learning. So we look at how we can structure the data such that we maximize the amount of transfer learning from one language that has perhaps more data to boost the performance of the overall multilingual model in a language that has a lot less data. In general, this kind of works better for languages in the same language family, but this is an area of ongoing research as well. Yeah, so that's a snapshot of how we go about doing these things. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think like AI systems in a way are very circular, and you had a slide where it was just a full circle, right? And that's how we think of making AI systems better. When ChatGPT was released, it was actually the third version, right? And they got it to a point where it was good enough for, I think, the mass audience to kind of use. And then they released it. And the point is to collect data of how people are using the AI system, and they use that data to train GPT-4, and they're using GPT-4's data to train GPT-5, right? And so I think also there's just a huge opportunity to meet people where they are. An example being in India, we are so used to like Google searching, right, for information and reading text. In India, the number one search engine is actually YouTube. So people kind of consume and search information through video. And a lot of different countries interact with technology in many different ways. And so I'm excited for, you talked a little bit about like mixture of experts and also multimodal models, where we'll be able to generate content and interact with people in different mediums, not only text and chat. If you think about the world, a lot of people are unfortunately like illiterate, or don't or will have trouble kind of chatting with an interface, right? And so I think there's a lot of advancements right now in sound. We just heard at the beginning of the webinar the music, the AI generated music. But meeting people where they are, where we can have them interfaced with these technologies and actually start collecting data of how they're doing that, to be able to train models better on their data. So in a way, we're like recording, we're starting to better record the digital footprint over time, which I think is super cool. And then, so I think we're at a point where training infrastructure, right? You talked a lot about the tools being open, being accessible. We have some monopolies in the world with AI. TSMC with the chips, NVIDIA, GPUs are scarce. We have ASML out of Singapore, which is kind of like the conglomerate of the company that develops these machines that we use to train AI. How is Singapore tackling kind of the training infrastructure and sovereignty problem? Because I think over time, a lot of countries want to kind of own that infrastructure, right? And be able to make sure that that's not taken out from under them. What initiatives is Singapore looking at, and how are you all tackling that problem?
Yeah, so currently we're sort of infrastructure agnostic, right, in AI Singapore. AI Singapore, by the way, is the single largest consumer of GPUs in Singapore, for obvious reasons. And we have a national supercomputing center, which was for many years traditional HPC, but is now pivoting over to tackling sort of AI training workloads, GPU centric as well. So we're building up the infrastructure at the sovereign level, but we are also very close to the hyperscalers, the AWSs, the GCPs, Azures, and all that. And the beauty of training something like Sea Lion, which is going to be open source anyway, is that we are open to getting compute from anywhere in the world, right? And therefore, the first iteration of Sea Lion was trained on AWS servers in the US, for example. And now we're working with other things and even non-NVIDIA, so like the AMD-based solutions from other parts of the world as well. So we take GPUs at the most cost-effective way, and we're building up our sovereign infrastructure as well. Yeah.
A national GPU center. That sounds awesome. I wish we had that here. We definitely. I think every country is gonna definitely need that in the next coming years, right?
Yeah.
I think something very dear to us is around talent and talent shortages. We kind of see that in a lot of countries, especially in the US. As TSMC is looking to diversify across the world, one of the core problems that their leadership team is saying is that they just can't find the talent to build out these chips, right? And I think AI engineering is kind of new in these past couple of years to people because it reached the masses, even though it's been around for many years in the technical space. But I think Singapore has been a shining example of how a country can kind of push for innovation and adopt technology really quickly and have the talent to do so. So what are some ways that Singapore, why has Singapore been so successful in having the talent and adopting technology and moving quickly in all these things? What are some systems that you promote or examples that we can learn from?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, AI Singapore runs this apprentice program. So apprentice program has been running for a long time, since 2017 actually, before AI became a thing, right? And it has trained hundreds of AI engineers in real world projects with real world sort of corporations. So that has gone quite a long way. And also because Singapore is small, it's easier to coordinate like country level sort of initiatives, right? So we can move fast and we can pivot quite quickly. And Singapore, as a matter of policy, also spends about 3 to 4% of its GDP on research, and therefore it spawns a lot of high quality institutions and institutes of higher learning in Singapore, which attracts graduate students from the regional countries, right? So our pipeline of AI engineers are actually PhD students from the regional countries that graduate from the Singapore institutions of higher learning. So that's been quite a successful endeavor as well. Yeah.
Awesome. I think moving fast, right? So now's the time to do it. So we have a couple of good audience questions. I think we can tackle here. We'll go with one here. Is there a particular branch that OpenAI, machine learning, deep learning has not yet reached? What industry do you think OpenAI will have a particularly big impact on in the next decade?
Interesting question. Now, this is a use case question, right? So I think junior like programmers who are just graduating from university should be really worried about with the advent of AI coding tools. You no longer need an army of junior full stack and backend engineers to actually create a product, right? Anything that is sort of scales linearly with the number of people will be disrupted. So customer service, right? Call centers, paralegals, these sorts of things, right? That requires a manual effort and that scale linearly with the number of people. Those things are ripe for disruption. So those things immediately come to mind, but I'm sure in every use case there will be some element of the workflow that's actually scales linearly with the number of people. And with the AI tools, it will then scale exponentially.
100%. Something else I see is a lot of investments right now is robotics. So autonomous actual robotic agent. We see a lot of investments in that. and obviously that I don't think we're going to get to iRobot tomorrow, but if you think about like warehouses and transportation and like container ships and things like that, I think there's a lot of construction, right? There's a lot of things that we can do to assist those workers working in those fields. We have another question, but how is Singapore AI dealing with authorial rights from the book's authors you're scanning information from? So this is around copyright law. I think tangentially, there's a lot of issues around identifying AI-generated content, right? And as we get more closer to videos, deepfakes, and voices, how can we tackle these problems being responsible with AI while still moving fast and promoting innovation?
Yeah, copyright is something that we take very seriously because we carry the name of the country of Singapore. So we actually scrub away all copyrighted material. And because we open source the data sets, it is plain for everybody to see what's in there, right? And if people detect the copyrighted material, they'll shout immediately. So we take great pains to do it properly and make it kosher. And of course, we sacrifice some performance along the way because if you use copyrighted material, obviously the model becomes stronger, right? But part of the strength is the trustworthiness of the model itself that is built off a kosher data set. So this is something that we take very seriously. It's part of our data pipeline.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. I think detecting AI-generated content is actually very difficult.
It is.
People are trying to develop models to do that, but it's not looking good right now. I think there's going to be a lot of like watermarking or embedded metadata, right? And like generated text to make sure that what is human and what is not. But it's going to be an interesting couple of years in that. One more question. Singapore has been a leader in AI entrepreneurship, etc., in the region. Darius, can you unpack how the public and private cooperation supports the nation's tech leadership?
Yeah, so in terms of public infrastructure, the government obviously takes the lead, right? So I've described a little bit about how AI Singapore is a government-funded agency. We're not P&L driven, so we can afford to do things that the private sector wouldn't do, right? But that doesn't mean that we don't work closely with the private sector, right? We work closely to sort of co-develop use cases. Some of the enabling tools that I just mentioned are co-developed with big private sector institutions, right? So because it's very difficult to co-develop you develop something in a vacuum. You develop something and you realize that nobody uses it, it's not great. So you develop something and it's a big pilot user that's sitting on the other end waiting to put into production, but we know that it'll benefit 1,000 other users. So that's how we do that. And we also do sort of co-research. So we have a research agenda. Some other big corporates or universities also have corporate labs or AI sort of departments that also have a research agenda. We sort of merge the two and we parcel it out so that we deduplicate the effort in that way. So these are some examples of how we work very closely with the private sector. We as in the government work closely with the private sector as well.
Great. We'll do one more question and then final thought. What is the largest opportunity for multinational collaboration to refine data? What isn't being done that should be prioritized?
Open source. We need more open source data and more contributions, right? So more community-driven efforts. Multinational collaboration is always a tricky one, right? Somebody has to take the lead, right? In Southeast Asia, there's this body that sort of like this multilateral body called ASEAN, ASEAN. But anything that's multilateral moves kind of slowly, and it's almost always easier for somebody to take the lead and for the effort to sort of coalesce around it, right? You need sort of like a totem to sort of galvanize everybody. That is what we hope to do with AI Singapore. But there's also another question, is there a similar sort of organization effort for AI in Latin America? I don't know. I would love to know the answer to this question. Jimena, do you know? I don't know.
I actually don't know, but I have some ideas of what we can do about it. If anyone's interested, please DM us. Yeah, I'm just thinking about so much opportunity also in industries, not just language from like countries, but also industries, like so much that we lose in terms of institutional knowledge. I'm thinking about those jobs and professions that are dying, like the people that are doing those jobs are, you know, just retiring, aging, about you know, just anything that we don't have enough written content for it, or that it happens outside of the internet, because a lot of this data comes from internet interactions or something that is recorded on the web. So yeah, so much opportunity, but in Latin America, we have a long way to go.
Yeah. Before we sort of tail off, there's one question very quickly I can answer. How many people are working to create models in Singapore? The answer is about 20 to 25. Right. So we're not a big team. We operate like we're in the government, we operate like a startup. But that's why we work with an ecosystem, right? We're not building models, we're building an ecosystem. And when this ecosystem comes together, it multiplies that 20 to maybe like a few hundred equivalent.
That's right. There is the question about the authorial rights from books. You know, you know, I think that Jerry and Darius, you may want to tackle that question about copyright, how to protect authorship from the perspective of building data sets, not just using
Yeah, we
when they're
scrub it
out there
actually.
already.
Yeah. I mean, we do scrub it. Like I mentioned, we take this copyright thing very, very seriously. And the way to police ourselves is to put it out on open source, right? So we open source the data, and it's plain for everybody to see that there's no sort of gray material in there. So that's how we deal with that.
Yeah, and that's the risk, right? Like you don't want to create something that is that if the internet is all AI generated, then there's no incentive for people to create content, and so then we lose the humanness of the internet, which is really important. So data preparation, as Darius said, but I think there's a lot of work around tagging of data and thinking through maybe how we can compensate people that contributed to training of the models, or being able to link where the data came from in a more kind of secure and deterministic way. But open source, and second Darius's thing is that's the big theme, and I see that a lot here in Cerebral Valley. People are very, very into open source.
Well, thank you so much, Jerry and Darius, for this. We already got a few requests for the part 2. So we'll talk about part 2 soon. We also want to continue inviting you, Darius and Jerry, to keep talking about AI in general, because it is moving so fast. It is moving so fast that every day is something new. And you being on 2 parts of the world right now, one in San Francisco, the other one in Singapore, you know, we can, and we're here in the middle. I am in the middle, and everyone really, we can kind of all learn together, so nobody falls behind. Thank you so much for this. You can connect with Jerry on LinkedIn, and with Darius too, and on Twitter, AI Singapore, and Build Within Tech. Jen has posted some of our upcoming events and webinars. A webinar about apprenticeships in Los Angeles County on April 10th. This is at 1 p.m. Pacific time. April 18, accelerating growth for small businesses, how a small business can take advantage of the apprenticeship model to build their workforce. And April 25th, the benefits as well as the challenges and how to overcome them in a very practical way. This is going to be a workshop session. May 2, cracking the code for how to build on-the-job training models in cybersecurity. And in May 9, how apprenticeships are becoming a tremendous method to address out of school youth and anyone between 14 and 24 years of age that doesn't have a plan on how to achieve that plan. So thank you so much for this and for joining today, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Have a good day
Darius.
ahead.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Darius.
Thank you.